ideal parents to the children, ideal brother to the brothers and sisters, and so on. You should be an ideal family member. But you should not be too much obsessed with your family connections. To such an extent that you become so worldly minded, you don't have anything else to do. You cannot give time to the practice of your own spiritual sadhanas. So that attachment should not become a bondage. It should not enslave you to such an extent that you need a shock treatment to turn towards God, to open your eyes. But then this man didn't listen. The householder didn't listen. He said, my parents, children, his wife, they're all extremely devoted to him. They would listen to him. They're as good, as attached to him as God himself. Well, the Guru tried to tell him, it's fine, you look after your family duties and responsibilities, but you should not be negligent or indifferent in performing your spiritual practices. But that man perhaps didn't pay enough attention. Then one day the teacher promised to teach him to demonstrate this fact. So he came to his home and gave him one medicine or something, which enabled him to lay flat as if he was dead. The man was dead for all practical purposes. So what happened? Wife began to cry and weep. Children began to cry. Parents began to cry and weep and all that. The man was listening to everything, but they thought he was dead. That was the effect of the medicine the Guru had given him. Then, the door was rather narrow, and the man was quite fat and big. So how to take out this body? So the point is, to take out this body, the door had to be broken. And that would mean you have to employ a carpenter to repair it again after the body is taken out. That involves money. The man has made plenty of money and distributed money among all these people. But they were not willing to waste money. The man is no more. Why should they waste money paying the carpenter? So you cut the body into pieces and take away. Now that was not a very pleasant thing for the man to listen. He was listening to all this. So he understood the depth of their affection and love. This story has got another version in the Gospel. Another version is, the Guru came there and told wife, children and other relatives who were weeping and crying, well, there is one way, one solution to this problem. We can bring him back to life. But one condition, one of you should be able to take his place. So wife said, well, anyway, he has gone anyway, so okay. He had innumerable children, cousins, and others. Anyway, the man has gone, so perhaps that is his fate. Finally, that settled everything. This is the version in the Gospel. But this has got a much more unpleasant version that was I was referring to earlier. There, the Guru doesn't appear on the scene. Guru gives the medicine and leaves the place. Man was rather fat, suffering from obesity, quite big in size. The window and the doors were all very small, narrow. So they were not even willing to spare enough money to bear the cost of repairing the windows after the body is taken intact. So they actually cut into a few pieces and take out in installments. So that shows the real nature of worldly attachment. And it is said that he was forced to open his eyes. He opened his eyes and he became fully aware of the nature of worldly relationship. You have to remember, it is not a condemnation of affection or attachment or love in family relationship. It only shows it is wonderful, but you should go beyond that. Both are real. In worldly life, worldly affections, worldly attachments, love, all these things are very important. They are sacraments the cement the structure of family life. They are important. But people who become too greedy, too selfish, and too worldly minded, because of their worldly affections, worldly attachments, for such people, this is good warning, that's all. That is the real message of the story, the parable. Now we will have interaction. Yes, today is the last session, so you can discuss any of the points that we discussed during the last 3 days. We have almost half an hour.
So Swamiji, when you said we need some ups and downs in our life,
not that we need. These ups and downs should be and are normally interpreted as the sign of God's grace, sincere spiritual seekers. If people get completely swept off these tragedies, it only means they are not sincere spiritual seekers. So a sincere spiritual seeker, devotee of God, interprets all these ups and downs as a sign of God's grace. If God doesn't bother about you, then He'll be happy. You have plenty of wealth. You go, all right, enjoy it. In the gospel, you find, the mother doesn't bother if children are busy with their toys. You heard the story in the gospel. Sri Ramakrishna puts the same idea in the context of a family life situation. Suppose in a family, a mother is engaged in different activities, housewife, different household chores. Children are playing. So when they cry, the mother will give a toy and children are happy. And mother doesn't bother. But children throw away their toys and cries for mother to take her or take him into mother's lap. Then the mother comes to him. Till then the mother will supply toys or small cards or whatever it is to keep the child engaged. So a weeping child corresponds to a sincere and earnest spiritual seeker. So God suddenly watches you. You are sincerely making an effort. But with too much of wealth or attachment to your own family members is creating some obstacle. So there are many people, I have to do that, so I would rather not meditate. I would rather not go in any of the spiritual practices. Because my father's distant cousin is going to be married, so I have to go all the way from here. So you find many people, too much of entanglements and attachment. If that person is a sincere spiritual seeker, then God, after compassion, gives you a mild shock that enables you to open your eyes, to wake up. Only God cares for you. If God doesn't care for you because you are not a sincere seeker, He would let you enjoy whatever wealth you have got. No problem. That's why many people, they have no problem, no conflict. If the lake is not disturbed, the lake remains calm and quiet. As I said, every spiritual pursuit is like steering the lake with a long stick. When you stir the lake, then only weeds and filth and mud come to the surface. When we try to meditate, then only conflicting thought currents come to the surface, emerge on the surface of mind. If people don't meditate, do nothing, everyday fun, but nothing happens to them. It doesn't mean they are really happy. It may take many more births for them to get a mild shock and open their eyes. That's all. In Vedanta, everything is an evolutionary process. That's Vedanta. It doesn't mean that tragedies or setbacks are inevitable ingredients in spiritual life. Not at all. The point that is stressed is that a sincere spiritual seeker is not deterred, is not shocked, not shaken by tragedies. He develops an inner faculty to interpret these tragedies, which may be very shocking to an ordinary person. For spiritual seeker, is a test, so that he becomes fully qualified. When you have to swim against the current, you become physically strong. Means spiritually we become fit. That's the idea.
That's why in Christianity say the cross is just as heavy as you can carry it.
Yes.
So Swami, it's said that I have heard in this order for a Swami to initiate someone, they have to have a commission from God. What does that mean?
Oh yes. Commission means in a monastic order, there is a tradition. The senior most monk, the hierarchy, normally spiritually advanced souls, they will understand that the person is fit, and according to the fitness they will give the responsibility to initiate. So it is a way of God's giving. So everything happens by the grace of will of God. That's the fundamental belief. So everything is built upon this belief. That's the right way.
So does the monk experience the commission and told, go ahead and initiate?
Well, all these are a bit subjective, which we normally don't discuss in public. Yes. Yes. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I'll stick to maybe one. So, I mean, today you discussed, I think, a very difficult topic for me to experientially realize, the feeling of non-attachment, because, just compassion or seeing the different, relations between me and all the other people in the world, right, the people around me. Sometimes you see something and you want to do something, you want to help, or these sorts of things, and it just seems like, it's hard to somehow also disattach yourself from these kinds of strong reactions, it's hard for me, if it's just me meditating or somewhere alone, with God or something like that, then it's easier to imagine, well, some things are happening to me, and then maybe it's sent for me to have some spiritual enlightenment, but sort of more broadly, trying to interpret for other people as well, seems like that's a harder thing for me to do. Let's say that you have a brother or you have a mother or something like that, and something happens to them, it seems much harder to just say, oh yes, this also is something that has been sent to teach me, for example, because it's not even really about, it doesn't feel like it's really about me, even it's about someone else, and it seems harder for me to just say, to disattach myself from that. So I just wanted to ask really about this question of the relationship between you and other people, and this kind of issue, rather than necessarily your own personal attachment to, say, your own wealth.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, for a spiritual seeker, who is what we call in Sanskrit Sarthava, the seeker, during the period of practices, we have to do all our duties. We must have affection, love, what we call attachment, because attachment is a positive value, the way it is interpreted in Vedanta, because of the different meaning attached to its Sanskrit equivalent. So, in Vedanta, we should not neglect our duties and responsibilities to the family members, to friends or cousins, not at all. Such persons cannot make any spiritual progress. The idea is a spiritual seeker who is an advanced spiritual seeker understands that there is a higher relationship with God. Because not that this is degraded or this is neglected, this is to take a back seat, not at all. Our relationship with our parents or brothers, sisters, these are very important, very sacred, and no spiritual seeker is allowed to neglect. They're very important. But as he progresses further, he doesn't neglect any of this. He develops a higher relationship, which is spiritual relationship to God, which in no way asks you to neglect or be indifferent to family relations. Not at all. An ideal spiritual seeker will be an ideal son, an ideal daughter, an ideal husband, ideal wife, etc. Perfect harmony and tranquility, inner tranquility and harmony in relationship is the hallmark of every spiritual seeker. Perfect harmony. There is no conflict. The seeker, spiritual seeker doesn't feel that conflict. When we look at it from our point of view, we may feel there is a logical inconsistency between these two ideas. But a spiritual seeker never feels that way. See, not when you go to a higher class, you don't negate what you learned at the lower classes. You go beyond what you study in lower classes. So there is no negligence or indifference or anything.
It's just hard for me to see.
I know, that's all right. No, nothing wrong in it. But another thing I can tell you, to clarify this point, there is a story of a great teacher in the Mahabharata. One of the most wonderful, one of the most graphic descriptions of real spirituality. A monk who had not yet become ready for renunciation left his home, did a lot of, he was not a monk at then, he was an aspirant to become a monk, and he meditated for a long time. He developed some occult powers, and he sat under the tree, and he found two birds were fighting on the branches of the tree under which he was sitting, and he looked at them because he was disturbed, and the birds were turned into ashes. They were burnt. And this person got up from his seat and started walking around, searching for alms, because he had renounced all his property. But his mind was not fully ready for this higher life. That's why he got so angry even when two birds disturbed his meditation. And then he walked around. They reached a home, and there he shouted, you know, in medieval times, alms for St. Francis, like Franciscan orders, it's a Bhavati Bhiksham Dehi in Sanskrit in ancient times, like that, Sanskrit decode. I come for alms, the mendicant. So, from the house, a housewife came out. And then he again repeated alms, request for alms. The lady said, please wait for some time. The man got angry, which shows that his mind was not ready, though physically he was practicing asceticism. When he got angry, the lady retorted, there are no birds here for you to turn to ashes. But he had traveled several miles from the spot where all this happened, where he was sitting. Because he wondered, why this lady, how could this lady come to know what happened to me this morning? Immediately he became polite and humble because he had practiced meditation. So he could turn the flashlight into his own heart. I was wrong in getting angry. So he became humble. And he requested the lady, please teach me from who you learned these yogic practices. The lady said, if you travel for some miles, you reach a market. There she gave direction. There you find a man sitting. His name is Vyadha. You go to the market and ask for this man, Vyadha. He went there, he searched everyone, and he found a man selling meat. He was cutting animals, distributing meat to his customers. And this ascetic reached there. The man said, oh, you are sent by the lady. You sit there. And this happened, the story is set around at the 5,000 years back, 3000 BC, Mahabharata, 3000, 4000 BC. So there was no communication, and he had traveled for many miles. Vyadha asked him, please sit. Oh, the lady sent you, please sit. I am now busy. The man became humble. And then that meat seller gives a long instruction, starts a long instruction to this mendicant. It is known as one of the most sublime poetical sections of Mahabharata. Now, remember, this housewife reach this high spiritual state, because she said, I don't do anything, I just look after my, she said she regularly looks after her husband, her children, and also her parents. She does her duty with total unselfishness, nothing else. But this unselfishness which she practiced in all her actions enabled her to attain this high status of yogi. The Vyadha also said the same. It's a long distance. So you find you don't have to formally get a sanction from a person. If we practice total unselfishness, total disinterested service, unattached service, we can become spiritual. But how to practice it? Because there are so many tendencies in our mind which prevents us from practicing this total unselfishness. For that, Guru is needed. That's the point. So nobody need to leave his home, become indifferent or negligent in his worldly duties and responsibilities. He can sublimate his worldly duties and responsibilities to spiritual practice, to spirituality. You don't give up, you sublimate to a higher level. Please.
Oh, Swami, I was thinking that we probably all have friends and relatives in need and who are struggling, and that one thing we can do is just to know that our friend or our relative doesn't belong to us, but belongs to God, and that God is there with them and taking care of them and meeting their needs. And we talk about the Atman being, or the self being within all, and so we can acknowledge that that Atman is the identity of this loved one. And I was thinking too of that statement about, am I my brother's keeper? And we are, if we see our brother or our friend as spiritual and divine, and that God is the essence of this friend. And that has an enormous impact. And I've seen that in cases in my own life when just a spiritual thought directed at someone in need has just a great effect.
But that's possible only for advanced spiritual seekers. Even as an idea, even to intellectually grasp the dynamics of this sublimation and practice it requires some level of advancement. But for people who can't think of a God somewhere and the idea of the divine Atman present in all of us, even for them, they can sublimate their normal secular duty consciousness, the spiritual duty consciousness. It's not so. Well, total unselfishness is possible, can take us to spirituality. Vivekananda says that Buddha is a great example for this. Buddha did not affirm a creator God, and Buddha also denied Atman. But Buddhism, on the other hand, is a sublime school of great humanism based on total unselfishness. Buddha himself was an example of total unselfishness. Because unselfishness, if we practice its totality, makes us spiritual, even without belief in a creator God. The problem these days that many educated people are not willing to affirm being a creator God. Why should there be a transcendental moral authority watching over us, supervising our actions? If we lead a good life in this world, pure life, is that not enough? It's kind of universal humanism. But universal humanism is not enough. Universal spiritual humanism is necessary. The universal humanism should become universal spiritual humanism. Otherwise, we won't get a base, we won't get a help to rely upon. We need a high ideal. Otherwise, the question arises, why should Vivekananda ask this question in the inspired talks? If you can rob your neighbor and there is no problem, God doesn't bother, you don't believe in God, you don't worry about going to hell either, you welcome that. Then why not rob your neighbor? Why not do evil things? If that makes you happy, that gives you money, wealth, everything. So there, what argument will you present to a person who refuses to believe in God? But you can say, well, one reality, consciousness, dwells in all of us, whether you believe in God or not. So if you hurt your neighbor, you are hurting yourself. You cannot hurt your neighbor without hurting yourself. In fact, this idea is something interesting. In Shankaracharya's commentary, there's a statement. It comes in his commentary on the Madhyakarya, which is a commentary on Mandukya Upanishad, which I referred to yesterday. He says, there's a verse is, Susiddhanta vivasthasu dvaitino nischidadridham parasparam viruddhinti tairayana viruddhiti. God is not brought in here. Nothing of the kind. No belief, no theology, no doctrine, no dogma. Pure, simple universe of humanism. But it comes from the Upanishads. It's commentary on the Upanishads. The idea is this. Advaita has no quarrel with anybody. Because Advaita looks upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family. As one body. So the point is, you can't hurt, you won't kick your own hand, your right hand with your left hand, because you feel the pain. Likewise, we cannot hurt another person. We feel the pain. There is no otherness. There is no otherness. So the same Atman is immanent in everything. Therefore, we cannot hurt anybody else, any other person, without hurting ourselves. So, the idea of God living in all of it, this may not be fully acceptable in modern times. Because it may be all right for those who believe in God, for conventional spiritual seekers. There are many who want to lead good life, who are highly idealistic, who are in search of truth, but not much bothered about God or religion or anything. The greatness of non-dualistic philosophy, Advaita, is it opens its doors and windows even to non-believers. It goes beyond theology.
Swami, I wanted to respond to your question. I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
Peter.
I also I think that for those of us who live very much in the world and are in constant relationship with friends and family, that this is Swamiji called the world our moral gymnasium. It's our job to use all the skills that we have, all the tendencies and abilities we have. When we notice pain or suffering in the people around us, or any need, that it's our job to serve them as well as we can, and to do that with grace and surrender, and that non-attachment is really definitely not about not caring. It's just about caring and understanding that you're not the doer. While it may be your hands doing the doing and your mouth doing the doing, but and then just offering what you have done later as worship. But I mean, this is where we live, is with all these other people, and we have to be engaged with them, and making that as sweet as possible seems really important.
And one more extension of that, Swami, sometimes in families, you said the relationships are important. One member, the husband and wife, may be very spiritual, wanting to do things, and the other partner is totally against it. So I've seen a lot of breakups on this point in a lot of families. One can imagine the spirituality, the person with this thing, but sometimes there are these do's and don'ts in family relationships that create a conflict.
Perhaps when people choose their husbands and wives, they have to be careful about it. I mean, if a genuine spiritual seeker chooses a totally unspiritual, non-spiritual person, then these problems do arise. If both are totally unspiritual, they may come to some clash. That will take both of them to spirituality. That also happens. The conflict arises when two opposite points try to reconcile each other. This happened, of course. Many great saints are coming from such medieval times, you find. Without those problems, like think of Saint Joseph. Father was a drunkard. Mother was a Saint Giuseppe, who was born in Italy. So Giuseppe, his name was Cupertino, the name, that is place where he was born. Mother was a strong-willed woman, hard-working, but so tyrannical, who wanted to put him in a monastery. Father was a drunkard. So just imagine. So, of course, I'm just giving several illustrations. The point is, in normal modern times, people have to think of these values right from the early days. When children are growing up, they should be educated. We can't tell them high metaphysics, teach them high metaphysics. They need job, they need education, they want to enjoy things of this world. We can't tell them, talk to them about total renunciation. We can tell them about the need for looking beyond all this, along with this. Not rejecting them, but along with them, they should be able to look beyond them. That's the philosophy you have to give the common people. Because all are not going to be saints, practitioners of total renunciation. So they should be told, along with secular duties and responsibilities, they should also try to practice spiritual values, going together, harmonious blending of the secular and spiritual. There are those who are completely attached, focused on spiritual values, but such people are very rare. Men of total renunciation, women of total renunciation, rare. For the common people, Vedanta is meant for the common people also. People who are studying the universities, working in factories, in the office places. They can practice a harmonious blending of secular duties, responsibilities, realities of this empirical world, along with spiritual values.
Swami, would you mind if I shared a story on this topic that Swami Prabodhanandaji shared with me when I was serving him? So he talked about a couple that he actually knew in some place in Karnataka. The wife was a devout Ramakrishna devotee and husband was a communist. So he did not believe in any God. But he told me the story that these couple really respected each other's path. To the point that one day in the newspaper, the husband saw that Ramakrishna monks were visiting the town. And he told his wife, hey, they are coming to our town, would you want to invite them for satsang and lunch? And she said yes, of course, and he helped prepare the meals and everything. They came to the house, all the monks and the devotees had satsang in the house, he sat in the garden. And after the satsang was over, he went in and mingled with them just like friends and had work. So basically the message being that if you can respect each other's paths and have that friendship, and otherwise it's a stable people, things can work out. That was the message Swami was.
They don't respect each other's path, that's the problem.
That is a big
That's the problem she raised.
Swami, I think that the passage in the Gita where Krishna speaks about how to speak the truth, you should always speak the truth, but it should not be harmful, it should be pleasant. It is a message of how you communicate. Say you have different values from another person. How do you communicate that? You want to communicate your values, but you have to do it in such a way you do not hurt the other, it is agreeable to the other person. There are 4 criteria for truth in that verse. I can't recall all 4 of them, but I don't know where that goes in the Gita.
Yes, one should speak the truth, and that truth should not be an unpleasant truth. You call a blind man, you are a blind man, you can't do that. It's a truth, but it is very unpleasant. So, but then you should never speak a truth which is unpleasant, maybe true, and at the same time when you speak the truth, it should be spoken in a priyam. Priyam means in a soothing, in a pleasant way.
And it should also be helpful, that truth.
Yes, it
When
should
you
be
speak the
helpful.
truth to somebody, it should actually be helpful to that
Yes,
person.
yes.
I mean, those are the 4 criteria.
Yes.
It should be truthful,
It should-
pleasant,
yes.
and
And
helpful.
yes, it should never be unpleasant, maybe true, but maybe unpleasant.
Can't call it alcohol.
Swami, I've been around long enough to see devotees who have suffered for decades, tremendous suffering, loss of children, loss of wife, loss of health, and they continue.
Yeah, exactly.
And is it that I can't see their karma?
True.
Is that it?
But another point is, have you ever thought why they are able to continue the spiritual pursuit? It gives them a tremendous, an intense feeling of bliss, blessedness, or joy, which is totally spiritual. It's a totally spiritual experience. Feeling of inner tranquility and joy, even in suffering, which would have swept off the feet of any lesser people. But in the case of spiritual seekers, they are not affected by that. So,
They sure look like they are
Yeah,
though. I
yeah.
mean,
so in fact, this is the hallmark of spiritual life. We all look for happiness, joy, satisfaction. All of us. All people look for this. At least they all look for the absence of unhappiness. That everyone looks for. But then, in normal relative plane, all kinds of happiness are momentary. Because when that happiness is always associated with some kind of attainment, achievement, which is momentary, which may be lost, which leads to unhappiness. But there is a special variety of happiness which is called blissfulness or inner divine contentment, which is not related to any achievement, anything that you get. It is in itself. In children you find this. That's why it is often children. Children are the only people who can be happy without getting anything. They may become unhappy when they lose something, but small children, their natural tendency is to look at the world with amazement, with joy and happiness, without really getting anything. Grown-up people cannot be happy like that without getting something. So that gives an idea of the supreme spiritual happiness. Gita says, Sukham Atyandiyam Yattat Buddhigrahim Adindriya, which means this absolute joyfulness, blissfulness, is beyond intellectual or mental plane. Everyone gets that. I can tell you from personal experiences, from conversation with people who come and work and toil, of course it can be very realistic here. People who come frequently to put up the tent here, the memorial. Why they come? Sometimes they travel long distances and they feel a great joy. You find this in all spiritual seekers. Without getting this joy, nobody can withstand it. Even when you listen to very serious spiritual conversation, which may not be very pleasant to hear, the same conversation will be totally unbearable to people, common people who are not interested in these things. They cannot withstand the onslaught of spiritual conversation. They'll be shocked. They'll run away. But some people, spiritual seekers, these difficult things, nothing very unpleasant, you are talking about the perishable nature of sense objects. Not a very pleasant thing for a common person to listen to. But they are right in the midst of that. Still they enjoy it. They may not have reached the experience level of it, but enjoy it. Even the ability to relish and enjoy spiritual ideas is essentially an aspect of spiritual experience. That's what everyone is looking for. Even intellectual enjoyment, momentary feeling of contentment or whatever you may call it. Otherwise, there is nothing tangible in this. How we are able to bear, to withstand this? Because of our own ability to relish spiritual ideas. That's why he said, Sravanam, even the ability to listen is a great achievement according to devotional philosophy. The ability to listen and discuss is a great achievement.
So may I add one question?
Ah.
This is a different question. In the story you are talking, the guy is able to understand with a simple thing what the family is about.
Mhm.
That's right.
Mhm.
How come after the death, the soul, which has no body,
Mhm.
no family, no property, has trouble understanding this?
Which one?
The soul after the death,
Ah.
which has no I,
Ah.
no family, no properties, did not understand, this guy understand it like that. Why the soul has so much problem understanding this is all temporary? Why it goes back and try to practice non-attachment in a world with attachment and attractions?
You mean why Atman itself is not able to understand this?
After the death, why it's not able to understand that
No,
nature?
after the death, the Atman doesn't realize that it is Atman. So long as we realize a waking state, real life experience, so long as we are not able to understand that we are something other than this body, the Atman, it doesn't become realization. After death, you don't become Atman. After death, that's called Sukshma Sarira. The Jivatma, identified the Sukshma Sarira, continues his journey. So every Jiva, every individual soul has to practice these spiritual disciplines till it realizes that it is Atman. And when it realizes the Atman, then it comes out of this cycle of life, death and rebirth.
So
Till this moment comes, the cycle continues.
it's like a two different lives.
If you ask the question, why can't the Atman understand it to begin with? That's the question, why should there be a creation? Why should there be this world? It's an ontological question. Why should there be a creation at all? The cosmology and ontology both are involved. The point is, Vedanta tries to understand the mystery behind the empirical phenomena by tracing the effect back to its cause. That's a basic dividing line between Vedanta philosophy or Advaita, to be more precise, Advaita and non-Advaitic systems, and also Abrahamic religious traditions. In Abrahamic religious traditions and also in non-Advaitic systems, you start with creation. From the cause you start, then you come to the effect. God created this world, in the beginning there was word, word was God, and so on. So if you read the Genesis, in fact, the Genesis begins with the cause and then comes down to the effect. Vedanta's approach is different. Vedanta looks around you.